Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Ergo Cast, the frontier for satiating your curiosity surrounding the next gen DeFi platform, Ergo. In these shows, we take the opportunity to cover the latest updates surrounding Ergo, with the idea of leaving no stone unturned. As mentioned in the Oracle Pools episode, the Ergo Cast is taking a double edged approach, with me and Robert working side by side to deliver each episode. As a rule of thumb, anything that we say is not and should not be taken as financial advice. For the show's purpose is to highlight the key features and pieces of progression within Ergo. For today's episode, we will be addressing the latest major development, which some may say is the elephant in the room, Yoroi. We have some very special guests today who have come from Emurgo, who will be explaining all about Yoroi and why it will be the go-to DeFi wallet for users in the space. I won't spill the beans too much for what is yet to come. However, I will say that this is an episode that is not to be missed. Without further ado, I am passing the baton over to you now, Robert, to do the honor of welcoming today's guests.
Great. Thanks, Ollie. So today we are joined by two of fellow coworkers, bosses, and other people within Emurgo who I know quite well. One being Nicholas Arcaros, the CTO of Emurgo, and the other being Sebastien Gilmore, co-VP of Engineering and Cardano Project Manager. As some of you may know, in the past week and a half, Yoroi has been released with Ergo support for browsers as the extension. And that is the overall focus of today's episode. We're going to be grilling Nico and Sebastien about all the latest and greatest features. Maybe I'll pitch in here and there talking about some of the future potential of what we're going to have with DeFi, with dApps, and with our up and coming stablecoin that we're going to be releasing inside of Yoroi. And so, just as Ollie said, this is going to be a very exciting episode for the Ergo community as a whole.
Awesome. So it's been quite a few years now since Yoroi first came about. However, the name still sticks in the mind as if it was released yesterday. So there is certainly a theme that accompanies Yoroi. And I think a great starting place would be to think about where does that originate from, the name Yoroi.
Yeah, I can take that. So Emurgo used to be a Japanese company. So our headquarters are now based in Singapore, but at the time we were based in Japan. And so when we started Yoroi, it was our first kind of public-facing product. And so we wanted a name that reflected our company. So we had some ideas about various Japanese names that were still not too hard to pronounce for English or international audiences. And we thought Yoroi was a good one because Yoroi means armor in Japanese. And so we kind of wanted to convey the image of this wallet that protects your funds. And that's kind of the benefit we get from the browser extension, right? So with a browser extension, you get the convenience of the browser, but still you get a bunch of additional safety because browser extensions run inside a sandbox. And so other websites and other browser extensions cannot communicate with Yoroi, and Yoroi can't communicate with other things. So it's all sandboxed, and that's what makes Yoroi as secure as a desktop wallet, if not even more secure, because oftentimes desktop applications can access your files, your computer, and so on, but Yoroi can't even do that. And so it's a very safe way to protect your funds, and we thought Yoroi, the image of this armor, was a good way to both convey our company image, our company culture, and also this concept of a safe light wallet.
Sure. So in some sense, the name also serves as a purpose, tied in with what it does. And as you mentioned with sandboxing, does this also mitigate the potential of attack with WebAssembly? As I was aware, there was some concern about that in the past.
Right. So the benefit of Yoroi is that it runs mostly offline. So if you actually turn off your internet connection and you open Yoroi, you'll still see your transaction history and so on. The only thing that Yoroi really accesses is our server, which gives Yoroi the state of the blockchain. And the way we kind of lock it down is two-step. First, we use a browser extension, and that already stops other websites and programs on your computer from easily accessing Yoroi. But also, browser extensions come with a feature to basically block certain URLs or all URLs from being accessible by Yoroi. So what that means is that when we release a new version of Yoroi, we have to specifically list which websites or backends it can connect to. So we list, our backend and then Trezor and then our Explorer, and that's basically it. So that means even if one of our dependencies is compromised and they add malicious code that tries to connect to their server, the request won't go through. The browser extension will block it because it's not part of the pre-approved list. And that list can't be changed at runtime. If you want to change the list, you have to submit a new version of the extension. And so even if we have a disastrous situation where we're using JavaScript, and JavaScript, we do our best, but obviously it's not a language with safety first in mind. Even if such a terrible case happens, we still have this list that basically blocks any malicious party from collecting information about Yoroi.
That's a very confirming explanation when we're dealing with funds that we have to control over and whatnot. The other main wallet that is specific to Cardano, at least, is Daedalus, which is another one that carries an articulate title. On an applicable level, what are the main core features that Ergo and Cardano users can find within Yoroi?
Right. So Cardano has two main wallets, which is Daedalus and Yoroi, as you mentioned. And the main difference is that Daedalus is a full node, whereas Yoroi is a light wallet. Okay. And so that means that Yoroi benefits from being able to easily run in your browser, sync the transaction history very fast, not take a lot of disk space. But it does mean that you do not store the full blockchain on your disk. You only store the transactions related to you. Now, Ergo has something called NipoPow, which could allow us to improve the safety properties of Yoroi for Ergo. But for the first version of the implementation, we just did standard light wallet implementation. But this is definitely something that we're interested in. So Yoroi supports for Cardano, sending transactions, receiving transactions. We support delegation for Cardano, and similarly for Ergo, we support sending and receiving. Our goal is to try and make Yoroi the most feature complete wallet, but also the simplest wallet. And these are kind of two competing goals. And because of that, we have on Yoroi both a simple view and an advanced view. And every user who installs Yoroi picks which kind of view they want. And so oftentimes the development cycle involves shipping new features. And then once we've shipped them, then we can review them, see user feedback. And so, okay, well, a lot of people don't understand this. Do they really need like this specific explanation or to know this much about the protocol? And if we decide no, then we remove it from the simple version and keep it on the advanced. And so I think that's what's allowed us to kind of maintain a balance of feature richness, because I think we overall support a lot more features than Daedalus, but while still keeping all these hidden from the majority of the users who just use these simple modes.
Sure. And there isn't any hiding of features when you go from simple to advanced. Each side gets the same application accessibility, if that makes sense, right?
Right. So for example, some features that are removed is that in Cardano, addresses contain multiple chunks in them. So it contains a payment key and a staking key. And for example, if you're on a simple mode, we only show you the address as is. But if you're on the advanced mode, we have the option for you to see which payment keys include the address and which staking keys including the address. This is a feature that some people ask, notably developers who are integrating some functionality. Say, well, I'd like to debug my app and use Yoroi as a test. How can I do this? We have this functionality available, but obviously most users still want to see this. They don't even know what it means. And so we hide it. Overall, we've hidden only a handful of features, but we've gathered a lot of feedback for the past few months about the Cardano implementation and the Ergo implementation, and we'll be making some tweaks to what we show, what we hide. But overall, our goal is that everything that's in simple is the kind of minimum set of features that you need. And if somebody says like, well, how can I do this in Yoroi? The answer should be, oh, if this is like a very specific thing, you have to go and turn on the advanced mode.
And you mentioned about delegation, staking. Am I right in thinking that you have the opportunity to stake in multiple pools from the same wallet? And would this be an opportunity to avoid saturation when staking to a certain pool?
Right. So Cardano doesn't support multi-pool delegation at a protocol level. This is something that we had for the Cardano Shelly testnet. And so some people remember this feature and then think, where did it go? And so we don't have this on the mainnet yet. There's been some discussion about adding this kind of functionality. But there's two ways to add it. You can add it at the protocol level, or you can add it at the wallet level. Adding at the wallet level is doable, but the user experience is much uglier, to put it frankly, and it's not so clear. And so the ideally we put it at the protocol level, but that puts more burden on the nodes that have to verify the correctness, because now when you have to compute to verify the state of the blockchain gets much more complicated. And also it requires the team that's working on the full node to spend time on this, but they're very busy with Plutus and Voltaire and all these other projects. And so it's hard for them to spend time on these other features.
But the wallet also supports multi-signatures, right? So two parties can authorize sending funds, etc.
For Cardano, not yet. So Cardano added support for multi-signature at a protocol level maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. But right now it's only a CLI option. And IOHK is working on a Cardano improvement proposal that describes how they think wallets should be able to handle this. And they have a team working on this. So once IOHK submits this Cardano improvement proposal, then we'll look into implementing it. But we do support hardware wallets, which is our current recommendation for people who want safety. And hopefully once multi-sig is available, then we can have a combination of hardware wallets plus multi-sig to have an extra boost in security. Obviously, multi-sig on Ergo will be much simpler because we already have Ergo script. And so once we do the integration of Ergo script into Yoroi, then this will be an option. If you're wondering why we can't do that right now, it's because the Yoroi extension is currently powered by Ergo TS, which is a TypeScript library for Ergo. And as you may know, there's a new library coming out that's in the works called Sigma Rust, which is the implementation of Ergo in Rust, which we can use through WebAssembly inside the Yoroi extension. So we used Ergo TS first because we knew it worked and we knew it had all the functionality we needed. And Sigma Rust was still kind of in development. So we went with a safe option. And now that we have the first version released, our next goal is to transition to Sigma Rust, add any new features missing to Sigma Rust if we find something that's missing or something that's not working correctly. And once we have that, then we can start working on the stablecoin project and all these other functionalities of Ergo that require smart contracts.
Awesome. So along with those mentioned, there is also facilitating features such as an option to extract and print a paper wallet. Along with that, what other facilitating features are there that can help a user integrate Yoroi into their general life or commercial reasoning?
Right. So one of the main projects that we're going to be working on is a concept of an Ergo Connector. Okay. So as I mentioned, one of the benefits of Yoroi is that it's really locked down in a sandbox. Nothing can access it and it can't access anything. Right. And people, when they're using smart contracts, they want the ability to inject code into websites and have the UI populate inside the website, right? That kind of contradicts with our safety philosophy, right? So what we decided to do to resolve this is we'll create a new browser extension called a connector. And the Yoroi extension itself can only communicate with the connector, and then the connector communicates with the websites. So that way, the Yoroi extension never leaves this kind of safety sandbox, and the connector is opt-in, right? You don't need it if you don't care. And so people who want to have smart contract support can download the connector, which will then inject code into websites. And so this is something that we're actively working on. And obviously, for some projects like the Stablecoin project, we'll have some stuff built into Yoroi itself for ease of use, but we can't build everything into Yoroi itself. That's just not scalable as an ecosystem. And so we're going to be working on this connector for both Ergo and a different connector for Cardano. And we think this is a much better permission system than other extensions like MetaMask that have everything bundled together. And you've seen a lot of blog posts about people saying, why is MetaMask injecting code into websites? How can I stop this? And, MetaMask leaks information about your credentials to websites or the fact you have MetaMask installed. And if you look at MetaMask source code, they have like blacklists where they say like, okay, if you're on a government website, like what's it, intent.gov, don't inject anything. Like these weird random rules to try and work around the fact that they just inject stuff. And we think a lot of this comes from the fact that they've bundled everything together into one extension. And if we split this problem to two, we can easily have multiple currency support because every currency gets a different extension that the users can opt into. And also we delegate all this handling information to a different extension that doesn't compromise the safety of the main Yoroi extension itself. I'm not sure, Nico, did you want to add anything on that about other functionalities we want to add to Yoroi for kind of business and commercial purposes?
Yeah, so basically we see Yoroi as this interface that also is going to put like a front end to everything that's like more related to like financial services that are being built on top of the blockchain. And for that, for example, our first test was staking in Cardano. What do this mean? That basically, as Seba already mentioned, we support staking in Cardano, but sometimes it's tricky because, for example, if you participate by delegating to a stake pool, sometimes there are like questions like, when do I get rewards? And sometimes they're like kind of tricky because, for example, a normal user will know about like epochs, slots, blocks, and sometimes because of the protocol specifically for Cardano, usually you need to wait like almost 4 epochs, which translate to almost like 20 days. But people don't know about that, so we need to like actually create like a UI that explains in like simple terms without getting technical when you're going to expect your first rewards, when the next reward is coming up, and for example, if you change to another stake pool, when do these specific rewards start like taking place, and until when you're going to continue receiving rewards from the previous one. And we already mentioned a little bit about the stablecoin. Probably we're going to talk more about that, but the idea is that also for like stablecoin, we are going to have like different functionalities, and the idea is that Yoroi doesn't only like allow you to interact with that. Sometimes like similar to MetaMask in terms that we allow you to like broadcast transactions, but actually that we will help you with like the UI, so you can understand everything related to like concepts that are like only from blockchain and they're not like so common in like the finance that we know every day with like our banking, etc.
So are these utilities for epics already integrated within Yoroi, or are we still waiting upon that to find out when the next pool payout will be and whatnot?
Yeah, so all of this is already integrated. We still like fine tuning it a little bit more because uh, the libraries and the tools that are in Cardano are like being upgrading. So, for example, right now we also got support for rewards, and so we're going to be showing like also charts. So you're going to be seeing how your rewards are like accumulating, and also we are like changing a little bit more of how we showcase like when you're going to receive different rewards. And so usually we're like always like reading Reddit, Telegram, and other parts so we can see what are the comments from people, and then that give us feedback because something uh, good but at the same time problematic about Euro is that we don't collect any information whatsoever. We don't have to analytics. We don't know anything about your behavior. So that's pretty good because you have like better privacy, but also it's bad for us because it's like difficult to know if users start having difficulties in some part of like the UI because usually with Google Analytics, probably you're going to have goals, which basically means that, oh, you want the users to be able to do these specific actions. So, for example, a goal in Google Analytics for an e-commerce will be to buy something. For Yoroi will be, for example, to delegate to a stateful. So we can see like the goals, and then we will be able to see back how much time the user took in like every action together. And sometimes we will see like there are like 3 steps, and with the goal we will see, oh, the user did 2 steps and then went to this other route, and then 20 minutes later he came back or she came back and completed the goal. So that will give us a lot of information, but we don't have that. So our only source of feedback is like reading Reddit, Telegram, and other social media.
Yeah, I think a lot of users don't realize how much a lot of crypto apps track about you. Like if you could look into the logs of a lot of the mobile apps for like, Bitcoin or Ethereum or other currencies, they know everything about you. They're logging every action, attaching user IDs to everything. And, it's just, this is part of their business, right? But for Yoroi, we just decided we don't need this information, and we want to be, a proper wallet that focuses on privacy. So the only thing that we have are server logs from just, when you query our server to get the transaction history, but we don't create any profiles off this. We don't collect any of it. It's all thrown away after a few days. And the only time we ever look at logs is to see if there's any like crashes or so on. But to do that, we don't need logs for like months or even weeks. So we just keep a very short tail of the logs for analyst crash analysis, but that's about it.
Yes, it's very confirming hearing that about the blacklisting not taking place, as well as the analytics that are being tracked. It's quite a shame, really, to hear about that, as this industry is all about freedom and decentralization, obviously. I think something that would be nice to clarify, at least a feature for Yoroi, is the difference between a payment URL and an account plate, as that isn't anything you could find elsewhere on any other wallets.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So one of the things that we do for Yoroi is gather a lot of feedback. So because we don't have any of this automatic tooling inside the extension itself, we rely heavily on social media, on a free help desk, and so on to get information about users. I think this has helped us a lot to be much more in tune with the user problems than a lot of other wallets. And one thing we realized is a lot of the times people are restoring their wallets, they make a mistake in the recovery phrase. Okay. And because BIP39 is not the most well designed spec, you can oftentimes make a mistake of a single word and get a different wallet. So somebody will write down the wrong word or type in the wrong word, and it'll be valid and give them a different wallet. And then they'll complain like, "Oh, I lost all my ADA. What happens? It shows 0 ADA or 0 ERG." And so because we got these tickets occasionally, we said, okay, well, how can we solve the problem? We can't really change BIP39 because it's already used by every other wallet out there. So the only thing we can really do is improve upon it. And so we came up with this concept of a checksum. So every time you create a wallet on Yoroi, it takes your account public key and hashes it in a few different ways. It's like 2 different combinations of hashes with different salts. And then it generates a picture and a text component. And we generated both a picture and a text so that people who are visual based off an image can easily tell apart. People who prefer the text component can easily tell apart that way. And this picture and text is mostly unique to your wallet. And so if you make a mistake in your recovery phrase, you'll get a different checksum. And since we introduced that feature, the amount of support tickets we get for people restoring the wrong wallet has gone down significantly. And a lot of times we do get a support ticket where somebody says, I restored my wallet and I get 0 ADA. What happened? We ask them, does the checksum match? And oftentimes the answer is no. And then we can tell them, oh, like maybe you typed in the wrong recovery phrase. And so these are the kind of features that we introduce to help users get more clarity into what's happening on the blockchain, other than just typing your recovery phrase like you have on other wallets. Obviously, we're always looking into new experiments that we can do to try and improve um, the simplicity and the understandability of Yoroi. So payment URLs was another feature that we looked into, which was a way to send somebody a URL that when you click on it, it opens up Yoroi automatically with the address field pre-filled. So when we developed this for the Yoroi extension, it seemed like a decent idea at the start, but unfortunately, Firefox has really good support for this, but Chrome doesn't. And as you know, the market share of Chrome has been gaining every year and Firefox falling or staying flat. And so most people have not really used this feature. The most people who use this feature are usually for the Yoroi mobile users, because for Yoroi mobile, we have a feature if you scan one of these payment URLs, it'll automatically pre-fill based on the QR code, the address, and the value. And so this is useful for like shops who want to have some sort of checkout system, where if you want to implement a pay with ADA, they could just show a QR code and the person scans the QR code, it pre-fills the address and the amount. So we're always interested in trying out these new features to see, what problems it has, what advantages it has, and how people can leverage these to build interesting use cases.
Awesome. So with all of these packaged or ideas packaged into Yoroi, the app, on paper, it seems to fill in the gaps which Daedalus misses. In favor of these points, Yoroi could be perceived as a wallet which sits in your pocket, whereas Daedalus is something that would sit at a vault in home. Yoroi is developed in-house, whereas Daedalus is community sourced. Are there any benefits from this with Yoroi being developed by Emurgo versus coming from the community?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So both Daedalus and Yoroi are open source projects, and they both have had community input. So Daedalus has had people from the community submit PRs to Daedalus, but most of the code comes from ManageK. Similarly, Yoroi is open source, and we've had people from the community come and help us out, but most of the code comes from Emurgo. The things that for both of our wallets, we decided to make it open source, whereas a lot of other crypto wallets out there are not open source. So this has made our projects more accessible by the community and also more trustworthy, because you can actually go to the Yoroi extension, find the commit. So if you go to Yoroi, you go to the settings page, you can find the exact commit you're using if you download from the extension store or on the Android or iOS stores. And you can go to the code base, build it yourself, and compare the code. And so we think this has been a good advantage. And we're open to anybody contributing. So if somebody who's listening to this podcast wants to develop a feature for Yoroi, either mobile or the extension, they're more than welcome to, especially for translation, because we write all the English text for Yoroi. But as you might have noticed, both Yoroi mobile and the Yoroi extension are available in many different languages. And these are all community translations. And so we have a lot of passionate fans from around the world who are happy to volunteer their time to help our project. So it is in a sense a community project, but obviously, it's in our GitHub repository, so we have a certain, amount of say in what goes on. But we're more than happy to have anybody contribute.
Sure. So it is essentially really well tailored for real world adoption, and individuals have the opportunity to manipulate the code for themselves and create alternatives through forking. So Euro and Daedalus do complement each other in one way or another. Out of all of these features, what is currently available within Euro versus what is yet to come?
Yeah, so we have some Ergo functionalities that we're planning. We talked about that with the connector, the stablecoin, and all the things that those features enable. For Cardano, which we haven't really talked about yet, there's a lot of features that we're working on. So probably we'll spend the next month or so just simplifying a lot of stuff. Because for Cardano, Shelly release, we added a huge amount of functionality, and now we're just kind of cleaning up and making it more user accessible. But we also have some exciting features coming up. For example, Cardano has a treasury, and so we're trying to work on some level of support for the treasury inside Yoroi. Cardano has, as I mentioned, multi-sig at the CLI level, and we're gonna try and look into see if we can add support for this inside Yoroi. We have some more features planned for delegation. So Daedalus has this plan for doing one-to-many delegation at a wallet level. We may implement that, we may not. Depends whether or not the Daedalus team wants to commit to this because it's fairly complex. And we also have this concept of transaction metadata coming to Cardano. So Cardano transactions all contain a field for arbitrary metadata, and that's going to be used by IHK for a few different projects. And we recently released a library for automatically generating Rust code for transaction media. So you specify a standard and then automatically create a Rust library that can parse and generate this kind of metadata that matches your specification. And so we're going to try and use this to try and get more use cases into Yoroi that don't require a full smart contract and are sufficiently powered by just passing metadata around.
I can see that the experience for users within Cardano and Ergo will be enhanced extensively with a variety of features that have been implemented. In this sense, can the release be related to a MetaMask-like application? I know you mentioned before about it being different and whatnot, but is there some common ground between the two?
Yeah, we've tried to avoid being MetaMask-like in a sense, because although MetaMask has some nice stuff with, injecting code into browsers and so on, we thought that most users don't use MetaMask as their primary place to store their currency, right? So MetaMask is like a place for you to put a small amount of coins you need to interact with smart contract. And a lot of people use different wallets that are more feature rich with a different interface for their primary funds. Now, if you have the Ledger wallet, you can use both with the same amount of safety. But we found that a lot of people really want this kind of feature rich, very safe environment and a different environment that has the user friendly interface. And so we've always wanted Yoroi to be this kind of safe environment that's feature rich, as opposed to this kind of play area where you take the extra risk to you interact with smart contracts and so on. And so that's part of the reason why we wanted this connector interface, like I mentioned before, so that we can build this bridge and have the two while still maintaining our kind of safety properties. Now for Yoroi mobile, it's slightly different because mobile apps can't work the same way as browser extensions do. And so a lot of wallets that try to do smart contracts inside mobile apps, but nothing has really been that great of an experience so far. There's definitely a few different projects that have pretty good experiences, and we're keeping an eye on them as we're trying to figure out how we're going to have Yoroi mobile support for Ergo smart contracts. But for the first release, we're aiming for the extension first, because I think a lot of the dApps right now out there don't work on mobile yet. They're usually desktop first, and definitely mobile will come at some point in the future. But this is just how technology works. If you look at, for example, WebAssembly also is the kind of thing that works really well in a browser. You try and get in mobile devices, there's a bunch of stuff that's not supported, and you have to do all these weird jumps through hoops. And because of that, usually we get features in the Yoroi extension done first, and then Yoroi mobile comes, usually a month or two after, just because we have to write all this stuff for the browser. Once we know the UI, we have the WASM code written and so on, then we can figure, okay, like how do we get this all running in a mobile environment? And so there's a certain flow to it, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of our development process.
So one way of describing it would be a bottom-up approach, deciding on the features and then working towards the core and implementation. So Yoroi seems to serve as a gateway for DeFi for Cardano and Ergo users to come. Whereas MetaMask its main purpose is to serve as a wallet, as you mentioned, but also as a stepping stone for Ethereum applications and only Ethereum applications. So with that in mind, where does the vision sit for Yoroi and Ergo as one?
So basically, we need to be thinking about like Yoroi, but also we need to be thinking about like the different projects like Cardano and Ergo. And for DeFi to exist, we need some like crypto primitive blocks. And for example, the first one that we will need is oracles. And Rob has been working on that, and we currently already have oracles in Ergo, which is like great because oracles going to unblock the second level of like crypto primitives that basically is stablecoin. There are like multiple types of stablecoins. The ones that usually give like the most benefits for a blockchain are the ones that are like backed by crypto assets. So, for example, that means that uh, if you put X amount of ERCs or ETH, you're going to be able to, if you put like 150% of collateral example, you're going to be able to create like for example $100. So that will mean that you put like $150 in terms of ETH or ERCs. And this is quite good for like multiple reasons. The first one is that a lot of people trade and like the one like the different blockchains like allow you to build like multiple tokens that are like utility tokens or other projects, and usually you would like to use like a DEX because sometimes like centralized exchanges take a lot of time to implement like a token. So usually when people want to work like get access to a new project or like want to like be able to be one of the first one, they usually go with like a DEX. And sometimes you also want to get out, not all in. And that's why when you want to have low volatility, usually like US dollar, the crypto assets like quite good. So that's the first reason. The second reason is also that although usually it's not that well looked, with stablecoin you get to get access to lending. So I'm I was born and raised in Chile. We are like a Catholic country, and some of you may know that during history, like for example, Catholics were forbidden to like be in the lending because it has like bad connotations. But at the end, it's something that in every country, in every industry, we have seen as necessary because at the end, like the economies of different countries, they work on mostly on credit, and this like modern economy. So usually like the credit doesn't mean that you're going to be asking credit for like spending um, like dangerous thing, but maybe for example in crypto you have a new project and you need liquidity, so you could be like asking for that credit to get liquidity to your specific project. So lending is like the second uh, like usage that's like really good from a stablecoin, and something like really interesting that lending with stablecoin is cheaper than traditional lending. And this is something super interesting because you have thought like, oh, traditional lending is like an old industry that has everything figured out. It should be like quite efficient. So in crypto, it should be more expensive, right? But actually, it's like the opposite. For example, in Ethereum with MakerDAO, like the interest rate that you pay for closing lending is like around like 8.5% last time that I checked, and usually in more traditional lending it's like closer to 20%. And so this is like pretty interesting because it also showcase a little bit more of like the efficiencies of like a blockchain, that actually we could be like better off for like everything that's related to decentralized finance, because like the efficiencies can be translated to like better prices. So I was mentioning about like the different utilities for like stablecoin, and I mentioned that it's like being able to jump to a low volatility asset like the US dollar, also about the lending. and and basically these are like the two most used cases for stablecoin, and also these ones later on allow you to like create other levels of crypto primitives. We have like some stuff that's like, for example, I don't know if you have heard about compound. For example, if you have the lending, you created a protocol that allows to like give interest rates. So maybe someone that has US dollar want to lend this for another token, or someone that has another token wants to get exposure to US dollar. And basically what you can do is you can start distributing this interest rate by like exchanging tokens, and this is what compound does, which is pretty interesting. And at the end, what you start creating is like this ecosystem where actually you can like in the finance more centralized way, you can start getting like interest rate for like some asset. We need to be careful sometimes with the wording of like interest rate, because it's like a specific to some set of like assets, but uh, sometimes you can call them like rewards, for example. But uh, everything makes a little bit more to be more interested in terms of crypto, because it's not only about like understanding, the value of this crypto asset. I think it's like quite above the current price, so I think it's going to go up. So you're like holding, but right now also you're going to take into consideration what are the different interest rates that some crypto assets can give me in return.
Yeah, and if I can answer part of your question also, so the way that we wanted to design Yoroi is to not be a multi-asset currency. And so you might be wondering, so how does it work if you have both Ergo and Cardano? And what I mean by that is that we want to have a select few currencies with very deep integrations. And the way we thought this was the best product market fit for us is because there already exists a lot of crypto wallets out there that support like dozens or hundreds of cryptocurrencies, right? And we can make Yoroi another wallet that supports 100 cryptocurrencies, but there's not really a need for that, right? Those already exist. There's no unique value proposition to Yoroi if we add a bunch of cryptocurrencies. So we thought it made a lot more sense to us is to go deep on the integration. Because if you look at other wallets that supports, like 100 cryptocurrencies, every cryptocurrency they support is like, the really, really basic thing. It's just sending and receiving, and that's it, right? But we don't want that for Ergo or Cardano. We want to go deep on Cardano. We want to go deep on Ergo and really provide a rich set of functionality. So I've seen some people wonder like how deep we're gonna go into Ergo. Are we just gonna do the send and receive and call it a day? But that's not what we're trying to do. We're not looking to support Ergo shallow and then move on to the next currency. We're really looking to go deep into Cardano and deep into Ergo. And I think that's the value proposition of Yoroi.
So it is right in thinking that in some form or another, Yoroi is a aspect of interoperability, or maybe a stepping stone in between the two. With the stablecoin now being on the horizon, will Yoroi enable ERG holders to lock in and stake their ERGs in the return of minting the new stablecoin?
I can jump in for this. So yeah, essentially, as Nico mentioned, collateralized stablecoins backed by cryptocurrencies, are one of the most versatile type of stablecoins because they provide the phenomenological effect of a stablecoin being created out of theoretically nothing or collateral, really, coming out of just the smart contract functionality. But it also gives incentives for people. So if people want to, let's say, short ergs or they want to go long ergs, this stablecoin actually allows that due to the collateralization. And so this is kind of one of our first approaches into going into DeFi, where, as Nico mentioned, a stablecoin is, first you have oracles, then you have stablecoin, and then you can do really everything else for DeFi. And what's cool is with the approach that we're going with Yoroi, where we have a stablecoin protocol that is somewhat novel. It's based off of an old paper from a few years back with a lot of new additions and checks and balances and a lot of new features, which makes it safer, more attractive for end users, and makes it easier for people to actually earn profit from stake or not staking, but locking up their ergs in order to provide liquidity to the stablecoin protocol. And so what that means for end users in Yoroi is that they will have a interface for the stablecoin where they can have their ergs inside of their Yoroi wallet used. You just choose 500, 1,000, or however amount of US dollars worth of ergs that they wish to create of stablecoins. And either they'll be able to provide reserves if they want to go long for other people to be able to mint stablecoins. And so if the price of ergs goes up, those people profit. Or if people instead prefer stability, whether the price goes up or down, then they can directly mint stablecoins. And so all of the UI for this will be inside of Yoroi. So both for people who want to go long or people who just want stability, we're already creating this first building block, this first stepping stone of a stablecoin, but also have this kind of beginning of DeFi where people can already start to go long. And I think that's going to be really exciting for a lot of people.
And you mentioned that the stablecoin will be backed purely by Erg. How will this differentiate then between current crypto collateralized stablecoins such as DAI, which have had some errors in the past?
So I won't bore people with the details, and I don't know if I can talk about everything currently yet. But effectively, the end user experience is quite a bit different for our stablecoin. So with DAI, you need to have someone who has ETH, and they have to be willing to create DAI by locking up that ETH, and then they have to sell that DAI on an exchange, whether that's a DEX, a centralized exchange. And then as an end user, you have to go to that exchange where they sold that DAI in order to obtain it. With our stablecoin protocol, things are slightly different, where the people who wish to provide liquidity and lock up their ergs, and the people who mint stablecoins, they are not the exact same person. And so let's say I want to put in 1,000 ergs and go long, then I can do that and put reserves into the protocol. And then say Nico or Seba wants to mint a stablecoin. They just go to the dApp itself and they mint the stablecoins themselves. So rather than needing this intermediary of a centralized or decentralized exchange, like for DAI, we're instead making the user experience simpler. And so we can have this whole contained dApp of a stablecoin where it's all in Yoroi. And we don't have to integrate with an exchange so that people can buy a stablecoin, but they can directly mint a stablecoin within their wallet. And that's what's kind of cool about this protocol, is that it's in many ways simpler and for the user experience and in regards to the incentive structure of how things work. But also it's less reliant on dynamic actions that people have to do. And so, for example, we recently did a small analysis with one of the researchers from IOHK about this stablecoin protocol we're building. And I think 7 out of 10 of the core reasons why MakerDAO and DAI had this big blowout in March of 2020, that was based on blockchain congestion. And 7 out of the 10 issues that they had from blockchain congestion don't exist in our protocol. We're not saying that our protocol is perfect and it doesn't suffer from blockchain congestion, but there's a lot less steps and a lot less dynamicism where someone has to submit a transaction in order for something to happen, or else the protocol will blow up. There's a lot less of that in the stablecoin that we're going with compared to MakerDAO. And so from both the simplicity and user experience standpoint, and from just a stability of the system standpoint, we think that what we're going with is quite interesting and beneficial, and I think users will start to feel it as they end up using the protocol through Yoroi inside of their wallet itself.
I'm guessing simplicity is the way forward when dealing with something like this. A basket of cryptocurrency seems a little bit catastrophic in some sense. As well as with the stablecoin minting being implemented, can we expect to see anything in regards to NFTs? Auction House just got released on Ergo recently, so maybe something might be in the works there.
Yeah, I can take that one. So this is something that we're interested in, but we can't do the integration yet because we're missing two components. We're missing the Sigma Rust library. Like I mentioned, Sigma Rust just recently is now kind of usable for creating transactions and all the functionality we need for Yoroi. So first we need to migrate from Ergo TypeScript to Sigma Rust. Then we need to build the Ergo Connector for Yoroi. Once we have these two functionalities, then we can obviously interact with the auction house dApp through the connector. And we can also start looking into actually building native UI inside Yoroi for NFTs and so on. So for the first version of Ergo inside Yoroi, there's some features that we had to remove to get stuff faster. And one of them, for example, is multi-assets. So Yoroi keeps track of multi-assets for Ergo, but we don't display them on the UI. But going forward, we're going to be adding more of this functionality, which means displaying, multi-assets and displaying, stuff related to the stablecoin, displaying stuff related to NFTs. And see, these are all things that we're very passionate about. But we're still working on the core development to get to that point.
So it's something we can expect in time to come then. Along with that then, what do you guys see in the future for Yoroi, especially in combination with Ergo?
Yeah, I can briefly touch on that, and then Nico can provide more detail. So I think these two protocols have some things in common and some things that are different. But I think that the points we have in common and the fact that our communities are quite well intertwined allows us to basically do a lot of work for both platforms at the same time. That includes, stablecoin on Cardano and stablecoin on Ergo, and NFTs on Cardano and NFTs on Ergo. And I think a lot of the benefit we would get in the future is by leveraging Ergo's current smart contract support to launch projects and then use Ergo's interoperability features to provide support for both blockchains in the future. Now, there's definitely a lot of stuff that needs to be done for that to happen. So obviously, there's smart contract and support that needs to be done, but there's also work that needs to be done on the Cardano side because Cardano can see actions that happen on Ergo because Ergo implements NepoPal, but Cardano has no native way to build the equivalent of NepoPal for Cardano because it's a proof of stake protocol. It's a lot more difficult, and so IOHK has done research on this that's mentioned in both the Ouroboros Genesis paper and inside the proof of stake sidechains paper, but these protocols have not yet been implemented into the core Cardano protocol. But I think once we have this functionality, I see a lot of the future of Yoroi being based on smart contract work and trying to play off the strengths of both Ergo and Cardano to provide a good user experience.
To complement what Seba was saying, it's like we are currently working in like multiple levels for integration. So basically, first we're working at the research level. Once we have the research like done, we move to implementation at the protocol level. So for this case, for example, we could be talking about the stablecoin with the oracles, and then after that, we want to have integration with Yoroi to be able to support like stablecoin and also some of the other functionalities. For example, what we could say like it could be the equivalent of staking for like rewards and also interacting for like minting and redeeming stablecoin and some other features that we want to have. But then this doesn't stop there because we are aiming to generate impact And what looks like that basically the most advanced users, the one that are taking it, are going to be able to interact with this, and usually this is what happens. But with Yoroi, we're like aiming to like be a little bit more like easy for like the day-to-day person, and that means like we need to work and rework the user interface. And we already discussed a little bit that sometimes it's tricky because we don't gather that much information, and sometimes we rely a lot of like feedback from people to be able to like uh, get it right. And so we have this process, but also a lot of things start like working in parallel. For example, once we implement like something in Yoroi, or for example, we have the protocol working, is that also other companies are going to start building on this. And sometimes they're going to be using the protocol, but at the same time, they're going to look for support from Yoroi.
And along the lines of building and Yoroi, is there anything in the pipeline for DApp support? Anything that a developer can use to build with Yoroi or inside Yoroi?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're working on the connector. So once we have the connector supported, then anybody who integrates the API will be able to have support. I think we've already submitted a public Ergo improvement proposal for the API we're planning. So if you're interested in building and you want to provide your input on what you think the API should be, definitely go to the Ergo improvement proposal repository and leave your feedback. But so the first step is obviously the integration in Yoroi, but I'm sure as we build the Oracle pool solution more and we add more features to it and we build the stablecoin implementation, we'll also be contributing as a company to the Ergo ecosystem in general. And so hopefully our contribution to the Ergo ecosystem is not just, a wallet and these cool projects. Hopefully we also contribute, tooling that other companies can use and other individuals can use to take the baton and build their own systems. We don't want this protocol to just be us. We want to be open that anybody can build on. I think that's our philosophy as a company.
So there will be toolkits and libraries coming in the near future to accompany that. And will this work for both Ergo and Cardano, the support for dApps? You mentioned about the connector.
Right. So we want to have two separate connectors. And if we ever add a third currency, we add another connector again. And this is just because we want to keep Yoroi as closed as possible. So if a user is a Cardano only user, why would it be injecting Ergo stuff into websites? It's just a needless loss of privacy and needless risk for the user. And so the users would only enable the connectors they care about. I think this is the most scalable way to do it and also the safest way for users. So we're going to build the Ergo connector first. And then once we have it done once, then it's just a matter of copying it and changing the API a bit. And so we should get a Cardano one, in the future that is fairly similar. But that's kind of our plan for now.
And if I can jump in right here, one of the nice things with Ergo and Cardano is that they're both on an extended UTXO model. And this is also one of the reasons why, as Sebo was mentioning earlier, that we want to have very deep integration for the blockchains which we choose to support in Yoroi. If we just chose every random coin that released in the past year and just added that to Yoroi, we couldn't ever do that. One of the great things is that we have this modular approach of connectors, right? So every single blockchain has its own connector. But especially since both Cardano and Ergo are in this extended UTXO model, the libraries that we're going to be creating for interacting with the connector, all the endpoints, they're effectively going to be the same methods and the same functions. Because on both systems, you still need the exact same functionality of how you sign a transaction, which has a bunch of inputs that are UTXOs and a bunch of outputs that are UTXOs. The transactions and the UTXOs and how they're created, that's all slightly different from Cardano and Ergo. But effectively, we have the ability to abstract to a certain point where, you know, after all those implementation details for each blockchain, up above that in the abstraction, they're essentially doing the same thing. And so we can abstract at that level and then have a lot of reusability. So a lot of the work we put into researching and how to make the best standard for Ergo and how it's all going to work. And, when developers start to build stuff, when they find, something that could be improved, all of these lessons and all these benefits that we get from releasing the Ergo connector first, a lot of those are going to be also transferable into the Cardano connector. And then maybe in the future, if we support another extended UTXO based blockchain, if those new ones ever come out and that ever makes sense for us, then we can, keep having this modular approach and taking the lessons from the previous connectors and projects and keep moving them forward. And I think that's why it's quite exciting for the approach we're taking, because we really want to have everything snowball while still preserving all of the user's safety, privacy, have a really solid platform for dApps in the extended UTXO model.
So Ergo and Cardano are already pretty fluent with each other in some regard. And as we mentioned earlier with P2P loans and whatnot, are there any projects in the pipeline? Anything we can be expecting soon in regard to Yoroi?
So right now, like our main focus is like developing the protocol for the stablecoin. It's still like not cheap, so that's like an important one that actually I hope that people are going to be excited about it. And the protocol is different than other protocols, as for example, you already mentioned DAI. So it's going to be important to spend some time to like working the UI and also working like showcase how this works differently than other things, because uh, people have like different like use cases. Sometimes you want uh, the stablecoin per se because you want a crypto asset that's pegged to the US dollar, but sometimes you want to interact with that a stablecoin to be able to mint dollars or like another fiat back, but you are going to use this fiat to buy more crypto. So because you want to go longer something, and usually, for example, for like more traditional finance, you use like margin, but margin is not like well developed, so people are like getting exposure to be able to go longer some crypto assets through this. But we separated these two things in the protocol that we are proposing. So this is going to be interesting because like we will need to build like different stuff. And as I was mentioning, this is more of like a code that we start building some things on the bare bottom, and then other things can be started like building on top of that. So uh, we want to focus in the what is like the next 3 months that we have less of the year and like be able to chip the protocol and also the integration with Yoroi.
So we can possibly be expecting something to come during 2021 or following the stablecoin release, essentially. Something that sets Euro apart from other wallets in the space is the fact that it is already integrated within the Ledger Nano product line. I was just wondering what this sort of brings to the table for people who use Ledger and what it enhances and so forth.
Right. So Yoroi has support for Ledger on both the Yoroi extension and on Yoroi Mobile. And we have support for Trezor wallets on the Yoroi extension. So for Trezor integration, it's fairly easy to add. So if Ergo ever gets Trezor integration, it's only a few days of work. Ledger integration is unfortunately much more complicated. So if Ergo Ledger integration is finished, it's not right now, they're still working on it, but once it's finished, we can look into adding it to the Yoroi extension and to Yoroi Mobile. But don't expect it to be like a 1 days of work integration. It requires a fair amount of code to add all the UI for it. If you're wondering why it's so different, it's because Trezor has a single source of truth for the UI for Trezor, So if you press like send a transaction through Trezor, all the pop-ups, the dialogues, everything, it's all one library that Trezor provides for you. But for Ledger, every provider has to write their own dialogues and images and steps and so on. And so it just takes time for us to design all this and ship it out. That's why, for example, for Cardano, once they released the Shelley Ledger integration, it took us, I think, maybe a week and a half of work to do all the integration for it. And so once we have Ledger support for Ergo, then we can, look into adding this also.
And nothing like staking will be a possibility within this, can it? Because Cardano doesn't support cold staking. Is that an error on my behalf?
I don't think it does yet. I know that the team at Vacuum Labs, which is the one the Cardano Foundation is working with for the Ledger firmware, is working on this. I don't know if they've released a beta version yet or not, but I know that this is something that they're actively working on.
And with storage within Yoroi, there is this mind map circulating online, detailing everything going on with Cardano, features and whatnot, as well as the partnerships, including Ergo. I'm just wondering whether Horizon or Coty, which is on the mind map, is on the timeline for being integrated in at some point as well.
Yeah, I can talk about Horizon. So the Horizon partnership was mostly an IOHK partnership, and it comes from the Treasury model. So Cardano has a Treasury system that's based off a few different papers by IOHK, including Treasury Coin, which ran on ScoreX. And so the Ergo community may be familiar with it. I'm not sure if the Ergo Treasury proposal is also based off that. I haven't looked into it yet. But so when IOHK did all the research for this and they released the Treasury Coin testnet and so on, they're looking for a blockchain that also wanted a treasury to experiment with this technology and do the implementation and see what works and see what doesn't. And Horizon was the blockchain that was interested in that. And so it's a partnership with IOHK and not Emurgo to basically roll out a prototype of this treasury system and see what they learn from doing this implementation. So I have not followed Horizon as much as I probably should have in the past year or so. So I'm not sure how well it's going. You'd have to ask the people in Horizon or IOHK about that. But I do know that for Cardano, we're implementing our treasury based on all the research that IOHK did. And actually, you can already even vote on treasury proposals for Cardano off chain, and we're going to be adding an on chain component in the coming weeks. So that's kind of some features that are in the works that are coming, but we don't quite have this yet.
So, in conclusion, what are the next near-term milestones that users can be excited for?
Yeah, I think people should be excited about the upcoming stablecoin project. I think once we release our stablecoin as integration to Yoroi, that's how you know that everything is production ready, right? So we might get the connector ready before then and a bunch of other stuff ready before then. But once we release the stablecoin to all our existing users, which is something like 50,000 for the extension, 50,000 for Yoroi Mobile, something in that range, is a non-trivial amount of users. There's no going back, right? This is production. This is the real world, and we're gonna have a lot of users using this product. And so I think that's if people don't have much time to read all the Twitter feeds and all the updates and so on, I would say this is kind of the big news event to look for. And once you see this is not just a stable coin, but a whole set of products and libraries that we've talked on this podcast, all coming together to be production ready and released with this stablecoin.
Sure. And is there anything in regard to the upcoming Goguen era, as well as Voltaire, maybe voting mechanics? for Yoroi?
Yeah, so for Goguen, we try and not announce too much for this because this is ultimately an IHK project. And so our goal is just to follow whatever IHK releases. And so IHK has talked to the community about releasing more information about their plans for Goguen. And so we'd rather IHK do the announcement instead of us. For Treasury Systems, as I've mentioned, it's in the works and there's going to be some stuff released soon. There's multiple parts of the Treasury, and so it's going to be released as the first part for it, which is a sidechain that's going to be running the Jormungandr code base. If people listening to this podcast know what that is. And there's going to be some transaction metadata format to hook Catalyst into Yoroi, but I won't go into too much detail because it's fairly complex. But I will say that this is coming within, the November timeframe. It'll be done. All the on-chain voting for the first round Treasury proposals will be done.
Brilliant. And there we have it then. Yoroi is an exceptional companion for the Ergo and Cardano ecosystem. Just looking at what we've even covered today is the first breadth. There will be plenty of resources provided within the description of this podcast, as well as a guide onto how to actually develop Ergo dApps provided by Robert through Ergo Playground. If there is anything further going forth, there is resources on the Yoroi website, elsewhere if need be. But before we do finally wrap up for today, is there any final thoughts or comments? Anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing else other than just thanks for having us on. It's been great to have the opportunity to explain all their plans for the future. I think we are in the Ergo Telegram group, and we're on Twitter, and I answer. Whenever somebody pings me on Telegram or on Twitter, I try and answer. But it's nice to have this opportunity to kind of answer all the questions to everybody at once. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And the only thing is, like, please give us your feedback. Seba mentioned we are in Twitter, Reddit, Discord, Telegram, and we would love to know what you think about Yoroi, what things you will add, if you're having issues with something, and so we can make it better.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I'd like to seriously thank you both for putting the time aside today to make this happen. And for those who are watching or listening, we will see you in a month's time. Thank you.